According to the United Nations Population Fund, 24% of adolescent girls between the ages of 15 and 19 become mothers in Zimbabwe every year. It is therefore imperative that we discuss the Education Amendment Bill, which seeks to ensure that young pregnant girls and young women remain in school or at least get the support that they need to go back to school even if they're pregnant. My name is Hlengiwe Mtetwa and this is the Girls Table. Joining me today to discuss the Education Amendment Bill is Samu, Maye, and Norma. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today, and please take this opportunity to introduce yourselves.
Okay, my name is Hlengiwe. I'm 19 years old. I finished school last year, and I'm currently on my gap year. I'm taking this time to just discover myself and learn new experiences.
Yes, again.
My name is Hlengiwe. I'm 31. I'm an educational psychologist and training as a teacher.
All right.
Okay, I'm Mtetwa Zondo. I'm a journalist by profession. I hold a bachelor degree in journalism and media studies.
All right, so once again, thank you so much, ladies, for joining us. 24% of young girls between 15 and 19 are going to get pregnant, and I'm sure the age can go even as low as 13 years. What do you guys have to say about that?
24% is a huge number considering the number of females that we have in Zimbabwe when we're looking at the population, and considering the fact that 24% the influence they can have on the other learners in the school setup, it's hectic.
Mm-hmm. All right, I remember when I was in high school, let's say between Form 1 and 4, there was not even one incident of a child getting pregnant. I think the first person that got pregnant was like during the holidays after. And that was just like one. So what is happening in the generation now that is making the rise of pregnancy even higher? Norma.
I would like to think that like there is no recipe really, but maybe there is no recipe when it comes to pregnancy. I believe at that moment anything can happen. Pregnancy can happen at any particular time. But then the thing is how you handle the getting pregnant and school is what matters. Life after pregnancy is what matters really. But when it comes to the recipe, what is making girls get pregnant and so we can blame vuzu parties, but it's not always vuzu parties because we have girls in rural areas who don't go for vuzu parties and things like that, but they get pregnant at some stage in their teenagehood. So there is no recipe when it comes to pregnancy. Pregnancy can happen to anyone at any time.
So do you agree that we can't pinpoint the reason why there's a significant rise in teenage pregnancies in the recent decade compared to the years past?
No, I actually beg to differ. I think that it's because of the rise in social media. We're all very connected and we're all up in each other's business now. And the fact that sex is really something that's being shown as something cool in our adverts, you know, in the parties, everything that teenagers are exposed to. Sex is something that is painted as cool and, you know, the it thing. And so I think that's why there's a rise in pregnancies. And I feel like the older generation, meaning our parents, should catch up with that and be able to be free enough with their teenagers to have sex talks and to actually have an open relationship with them so that the teenager can actually go and ask the parent, because now we're also interconnected and we are having younger kids knowing about things that in the past maybe it would only be older people knowing about them.
All right. So I think you and I are roughly from the same generation. She says for this generation now, sex seems like a cool thing. Because back in our days, it was like...
Yeah.
You agree?
Yes, I agree. I think what's really led to the rise is that parents have slightly, maybe not even slightly, have loosened the leash on their children. And besides loosening the leash, most of the parents are absent parents. Most children are staying on their own and they're making decisions on their own. They're actually vulnerable at the moment. So there's no one to give advice to those, the girls, and they're just in an open space where anyone who wants to get access to them gets access to them. That's what's going on now.
So what do you have to say to what the two ladies are saying?
I would like to differ to what they're saying because I believe we can't blame social media. Before the era of social media, right, people got pregnant, some at their teenage stage, and just because of social media, we now get to know what is happening faster, quickly. We now get to know the statistics, you understand? So I believe it's because of social media that we are now aware of how many people are getting pregnant in schools, blah, 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 at their teenage stage. But I believe we can't really blame we can't really blame social media. At the same time, we can't also blame our parents saying they are now not really harsh, they should talk to young people. It's not even about that, because you will find that a person who has a very strict parent, they still go out, do their things and get pregnant at their teenage stage. Your mother has no control over you when you're outside the house. You do what you want to do. If you decide to go to a party, have sex, do blah, 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 they have no control over that. And I also believe, remember, our grandparents used to tell us how much they were beaten up and so forth. And they got pregnant at what age? 16, 15, 13. And their mothers were very strict as well. So we can't really blame our parents and say, oh, times have changed. Yes, times have changed. But let's not forget that these things happened even way before social media existed.
So Noma is saying, you know what? Let's stop trying to justify and find reasons. Thing is, people are getting pregnant, get with the program. What's important is deciding what we do now after the pregnancy has happened.
You know, I'm worried really about the way things are happening now. What happened to the little voice that would, you know, kind of tell you that, no, I shouldn't do this because my parents don't want me to do this? Somehow the current girls don't have that. You know, we do things because I just want to do it, regardless of the consequences that are going to come afterwards. So I'm asking myself, where is that little voice that used to remind us that I'm not supposed to do this?
Listen, I'm almost 40 and that voice is there.
It's still there.
Like, sis, get yourself together.
You see,
So
I'm worried about the teenage girls that are coming up. Where's that little voice? And I was talking to a group of teenage girls, and they made it clear to me that I have no idea what they are going through, and I come from a different generation. But I'm only about 10 years older than them, but I come from a different generation. I don't understand how sex is important and how alcohol is important. And that it really doesn't matter how many times I've had sex or who I've had sex with or what I'm drinking. It doesn't matter at this particular stage. So that's why I'm saying, where's the voice that's going to remind us that, why am I doing this?
Okay, so you are within the age range of the young people that we're talking about. She's asking, where is that voice? Do you feel comfortable to speak for your generation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think for me, I lived through sort of two eras. There's the 2000 kids, and then there's the kids after that. And what me and my friends, most of my friends have noticed is that there is a difference between, let's say, kids born in the earlier years of the century and kids born in the later years of the century. Because when we were born, social media wasn't yet that big a thing, and so we didn't really see much of the world. And yes, I'm still sticking to my point that social media is a contributing factor in the rise of teenage pregnancies. So you see that with the other kids, the younger generation, with the same generation, but the younger teenagers, they're more open about their sexuality and they're more open about having sex. Whereas for the older ones, we're still a bit timid because we've still got that thing where it's like, it's not really proper, I guess, because of the way we were raised. And the younger generation, they were raised by their parents, the same parents, yes, but then they were also exposed to so much. You know, when you turn on the TV, there's just sex everywhere. Social media, it's the same thing, you know, sex everywhere. And so the way that thing has been painted, it's now like it's a cool thing. And if you look at Bulawayo, for example, there's really nothing for young people to do. And when you're only exposed to the bad aspect of life, I guess I could say the bad aspect since we're still young, it seems like the only cool thing that you can do. It seems like the only thing that you can do for fun. And that's why you've got the rise in the vuzu parties, and that's where people get pregnant. So I wouldn't necessarily say there's no recipe for it, because there is a reason why there's a rise in teenage pregnancies. And we can't necessarily compare my generation to our grandparents, because back then, child marriage was more than it is now. And back then it was proper for a 16-year-old to have a child. At my age, I'd actually be considered old. They'd be like, why aren't you married? Why don't you have kids? So we can't really compare ourselves to the older generations.
Do you think being naive and clueless and burying our heads in the sand with regards to reality of how young people engage and process information relating to their sexuality, do you think we need to get with the times and realize that this is a different era altogether and stop wishing young people today would behave how young people used to back then?
Yes, I kind of believe that we should get ahead with times, and yes, parents should maybe open up, because I believe at times it can help. Maybe those mother-daughter relationships, don't do this, if you do this, this will happen. Yes, it's a good thing. At the same time, I believe maybe making young people aware of the consequences after engaging in sexual activities will also help, because it's not even about pregnancy. What are you going to do after pregnancy? Is it okay for you to be a teenager and having a baby at the same time? How is society going to take you, and how are you going to relate with the society? Are you going to be comfortable being a teenage mother yourself? At times, you know, speaking from experience, I was a teenage mother, and believe you me, it wasn't an easy thing. Imagine dealing with people around the community. They'll be looking at you saying, this one, she's so loose, she got pregnant at a young age. But I wasn't loose, imagine, but I got pregnant. So at times, it's you being yourself. You have to know that, are you really ready to face the community, being a mother, a teenage mother? So the consequences after getting pregnant or indulging in sexual activities and later on getting pregnant as a teenage person, it really matters. People should be made aware. Life after pregnancy, what happens after you're pregnant?
Okay, so maybe we'll come to the issues surrounding pregnancy. She says, you know, we need to deal with what happens after pregnancy. So out she is trying to say, please don't get pregnant, because, you know. So the Education Amendment Bill is basically a reconciliation between the Education Act of 2006 and the new Constitution of 2013. So there are many other issues in the amendment bill: corporal punishment, children with disabilities. But for this particular segment, we want to talk about the issue of pregnant young girls in school. What's your understanding of the Education Amendment Bill regarding to this issue specifically?
My understanding of the current bill is that pregnant learners should be allowed to continue learning and should be given 3 months, what do you call it? Given 3 months after giving birth, then they come back to school. So during the 9 months or however long, they should be in class with everyone else. Then when they give birth, 3 months they come back to school. Mm-hmm. But it's up to the child to decide whether they want to take the full 3 months or they can take lesser time to heal, then come back to class. That's my understanding.
Your understanding?
My understanding of the Education Amendment Bill is that young pregnant girls should be allowed to go back to school before you'd automatically get expelled if you fell pregnant. But now they're saying that if you're pregnant, you should be allowed to go back to school and continue with your education even while you're pregnant.
Are you for or against the bill? Do you think it's okay for young people to be allowed to stay in school even when they're pregnant? I think, especially speaking from your own experience, did you happen to be able to stay in school?
Well, when I got pregnant, at that time, once they knew that you were pregnant, you would get expelled. But then I didn't tell anyone. So I was in A-level, I was doing my A-level. So I got pregnant while I was doing my A-level and wrote my exams. Never said a word to anyone, but there were just rumors that, oh, she's pregnant. But no one really knew, or no one really had the evidence to say you're pregnant.
Okay.
But at the same time, I would like to say I am for the view that teenage pregnant girls should continue with their education. It's very important. I am a testimony of that. Today I'm a journalist. I went back to school after having my kid. So I believe they should be given the opportunity to go back to school, and you might never know, they'll get to educate themselves and take care of their children. That's what we want at the end of the day.
Should pregnant young girls be included or excluded from the education, or should be expelled from school? Should they be allowed to stay? We want to look also at the realities and the experience of staying in school when you're pregnant. She speaks about the rumors, the way people are going to be treating you and so forth. Do you think young girls should stay in school?
I do think young girls should stay in school, or at the very least, they should be given that option to be able to go back to school even though they're pregnant. Because what we're trying to do in Zimbabwe is move with the times, right? We're trying to empower the girl child. And so if you want to fully empower the girl child, you can't choose to pick certain aspects and leave others. So if she's pregnant, she's still a female child, she still has the capacity to go to school, and if she wants to, she should be allowed to continue with her education.
So according to an MP from Shiriki North during the debating of the bill, he says protecting young girls from expulsion or allowing them to be in school while they're pregnant encourages the behavior that gets them pregnant. Do you agree?
I agree. But like she was saying, the teenagers are already having sex, so we can't deny that. Whether she's pregnant or she's not pregnant, at the end of the day, most probably 90% of them are having sex. So it's most probably going to encourage them that, fine, we can continue with what we are doing, because even if I get pregnant, I'm going to come back to school. But my major worry is the teenage girl being able to cope with everything that's happening in school, with the home setup. Like she mentioned that during her experience, she didn't tell anyone. That's common in every teenage pregnancies. They keep quiet, and in most cases, parents get to realize when the child is in labor that this person has been pregnant. So that only does not risk the life of the teenager, but the life of the unborn child. So at the end of the day, when we do encourage teenage girls to come back to school, they are going to influence the others. And at the end of the day, we are risking the teenage girl's life. And the moment where you find a teenager not telling anyone close, it's because the teenager is in denial. That's the main reason why you don't want to tell anyone else. You've done the pregnancy test and it's reflected that you're pregnant, but you wait 7, 8, 9 months to tell someone. That's a sign that you're in denial. And number two, the most important aspect that a teenager is likely to go through is depression. And usually when an individual is depressed, they come up with suicidal ideations, and imagine them being in school, being in class, having to deal with the depression, having to deal with the issue that I haven't told my parents, and the rumors, people are busy talking. Did you see your stomach is getting bigger? And now you have to deal with your assignments, you have to deal with everything. I don't know how the teenager is going to manage to deal with all of that.
You want to jump in?
Yes. I would like to say, firstly, I didn't hide it from my parents that I was pregnant. I told them when I was 2 months pregnant that I was pregnant, but I was not comfortable telling the principal and everyone else at school, but my friends knew. And we were a squad by then. It was 5 of us, and I'm the only one who got pregnant. Up to today, the other 4, they don't have kids. I was the only one who had a kid. So I never influenced anyone to go and have sex and get pregnant. So you can't influence anyone to go and get pregnant, is it? And then at the same time, coping, I wrote my exams, my A-level exams, pregnant. I made it, I passed, I went to varsity. So depression, suicidal, blah, 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 I don't believe in that. It's only you sitting down, you are pregnant, yes, I'm pregnant. What's the way forward? How can I make up for what has happened to me? I have to live after this pregnancy. So it's all about you telling yourself what you want and what you need to do in order to make up for the mistakes that you have made. So I told myself, I sat down and I told myself, I'm doing my A-level, I have to pass my exams. I still want to go to varsity, I still want to have my degree, so nothing can stop me, not even the pregnancy. And yes, my child is now in grade 3, and I've done my degree, I have my degree, and I'm still moving forward. There is nothing stopped me, and nothing will ever stop me. So I also believe that this should be the mindset of other teenage pregnant females, that there is still life after pregnancy. Your life will not end there. Just because, not that I'm saying they should go and get pregnant, but there should be life after pregnancy. Committing suicide won't assist you with anything. It won't help in any way. Instead, your parents, they'll be crying and saying, how come she never told us? If only she had told us, we would have done this and that. And having a supportive family as well, it also helps. You understand? So.
Can I interject there? That particular issue is that you are lucky when you have a supportive family. But in many cases, you'd find parents don't want anything to do with you because of the embarrassment that is associated with teenage pregnancy. And what happens to that particular child who knows that if the moment I tell my mother that I'm pregnant, I'm out of this house. The moment I tell my mother that I'm pregnant, where am I going to live? Financially, how am I going to survive? Those are things that affect many children in this day, because already as a family, most of them are struggling to make ends meet as a family. Now as a teenage mother, you're coming in with an extra, I don't want to say burden, but an extra burden. And at that particular moment, your parents will say, you're an adult now, treat yourself like that, move out of the house. So it becomes strenuous on that particular child. It becomes strenuous on the school. And you mentioned on the fact that you are the only one who got pregnant and your friends didn't get pregnant. But the chances are very high with your friends asking you, how was the sex? And you'd want to communicate with your friends how the sexual intercourse was. And that particular moment, it would want to make your friends say, if she experienced it, why can I not? She might not have got pregnant, but she might have wanted to experience the sexual relationship with whoever. So at the end of the day, being pregnant is the end result of sexual intercourse. And at the end of the day, your friends are saying, if she did it, why can't I not? If she can come into class, why not me?
Okay, let me respond.
Let's come back. Yes. Okay, so I listened to your story and I feel like you're very fortunate with the strength of will and character to say, this happened, but I need to pull myself together. But I feel like not everybody has that strength of character and will. Mental health issues are very real. Anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and so forth. So are we saying it's just enough for you to be back in school, it's not necessary for you or for the school or for the church or parents to put in place measures to help the children cope during the pregnancy, in school and outside of school. Because it's one thing to say, okay, you can be back in class, but it's another thing to equip you and prepare you for the journey. I mean, pregnancy is stressful outside school, like with your husband that is rich and a big house and someone that's helping you. It's a lot. So imagine for a young person without all of that. So are you saying it is not important to also look into the other issues surrounding the transition back in school?
No, I'm not saying that, Hlengiwe. As I say that having a supportive family also helps, you understand? And I also
what about
believe
those that don't have supportive
yes,
families?
I'm going getting there. So imagine if you are going to the old churches, the Brethren in Christ, blah, 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 blah.
Orthodox, yeah.
Yes. So when you get pregnant, you understand, when you get baptized in those kind of churches, at times when you get pregnant, you have to go back to the church, apologize in front of them. Oh, I sinned against God, blah, 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 blah. And at times, many young girls prefer not to go back to those kind of churches when they fall pregnant, because they have to go and face the church and say and apologize, blah, 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 or even facing the community or maybe their schoolmates and stuff like that. So I believe, yes, the school should have a supportive system which will be a kind of a backing bond for the teenage pregnant girls, so that when they're at school, they are comfortable to continue with their studies and no one is making any fun of them and stuff like that. Even in church, you have to go to church freely, not having, imagine you have to apologize to the whole church. They have to be looking at you. Maybe your age mates will be laughing at you by that time, saying, oh, she got pregnant, she's loose and stuff like that. So I believe, yes, we do need the supportive structures in the churches, in the community, even in schools. So that these teenage pregnant mothers can continue with their education in a free space, in a comfortable space.
Let's bring the discussion to Samu. As a young person, what do you think the impact is on a young pregnant girl of being back in school while pregnant?
Obviously, there'll definitely be bullying. There'll definitely be gossiping, because when you're a teenager, you're quite judgmental, you know. So there'll definitely be a number of people who are bullying you, gossiping about you. It won't be a nice experience. And I guess to everything, there's always a downside, which is why earlier I said she should be given a choice at the very least. If she doesn't want to go back to school, if she prefers to maybe just take that year to take care of herself and take care of her child, she should be free to do that. But then at the same time, if she decides to go back to school, I feel like there should be maybe a school counselor who's there to support her and help her transition back into school, and be free for her to talk to her even when she's feeling down. Because I'm sure that when you're pregnant and you're back at school, especially in our society, it can be a big scandal and it can be quite difficult, and not everyone is lucky to have understanding friends, understanding schoolmates, understanding family. So you definitely need someone who will be there to help you out. So if you've got maybe teachers who are psychologists, they can be put in a sort of council to help the pregnant girl when she's back at school.
Okay. What is the best case scenario in terms of the government or relevant authority making this transition more bearable for young pregnant girls?
Most probably creating an environment that is suitable for the teenage pregnant mother. By creating a suitable environment is talking to the teachers. The teacher should be knowledgeable on how to deal with that particular child. The counselors should be readily available, because they are most probably issues that the child is likely to face on a daily basis, and she definitely needs a shoulder to lean on. So the counselors should be readily available in the schools. Even the principals, they should be equipped to handle such issues, because in some cases you'd find that that particular child does not have family support, and the only place where she feels comfortable in is in the school walls. So if the people in the school are not equipped to actually deal with that particular case, it further burdens that particular child. So the government needs to train, the teachers to be able to deal with such cases, have more counselors in the school area to deal with that particular issue.
Did any of you follow the actual hearings that took place when this bill was being debated? One thing stood out for me when, I think it was an MP in Bulawayo actually, who says, what then about the consequences for your actions? Because if you've decided to be a parent, then go and parent, because clearly you don't want to be at school, and that schools are not maternity wards. So you've made your choice, suffer the consequences. What do you have to say about that?
I think I'm in agreement. Like they say, spare the rod, spoil the child. If there's no consequence for your action, then it justifies every other person to just do as they please. So at the same time, when the pregnant teenager just simply comes into school, nothing's done, and everyone else feels it's okay. Yeah.
And listen, usually the responsibility of taking care of the child hardly falls on the teenager. I don't know, maybe you can tell us. Because now, go and your mama are the ones that are taking care of the child while you go to school. So what do you have to say about the issue of consequences and teaching our children to be responsible for their action? You get pregnant, you don't go to school. If you want school, then don't get pregnant.
Okay, guys, I would like to highlight something to you. The guys that are not getting pregnant, other teenage females that are not getting pregnant, it does not mean they're not indulging in sex.
True.
So let's take note of that. The one who gets pregnant does not mean maybe they were careless or they are loose. You understand that? Because when it comes to my case, among the 5 of us, I was the only one who was left out a virgin. And that one incident just got me pregnant at that moment. So you can imagine. So that does not mean I was loose, does it? I don't think so. So if we say consequences for your actions, then it's not fair. The other guys are having sex, they're indulging in sexual activities, but maybe they know that there is morning after pill, there are condoms, there is blah, 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 they have the knowledge. And this one who's clueless just gets pregnant, just like that, just after one incident. Imagine, and then you tell them you can't go back to school, then it's not fair. So, okay, let's say lose virginity, don't go to school then. Does it make sense now?
It's a bit different. You want to chip in?
Yes.
The issue of
Well,
consequences.
I think falling pregnant in itself is a consequence because there's obviously more responsibilities. If you're one of those vain teenagers, definitely the body, seeing yourself growing bigger or seeing the stretch marks now from being pregnant, it's definitely a consequence, and it doesn't feel good when you're pregnant and you see that your other friends aren't, because even if you go back to school, even if you leave your child to be taken care of by your parents, the thing is you'll still come back home and you'll still have to mother that child. You'll still have to miss out on some parties or some school events that aren't really necessary for your academics. You'll still miss out on a lot. So falling pregnant in itself, I think, is a consequence. Now it's up to the parents to actually encourage the teenage mother to chip in on raising her own child, to be like, no, you can't go clubbing, you can't go for the party, you can't meet up with your friends. If you want to go, take the baby with you. I think that in itself is a consequence enough. I guess the mistake that people would make is once the child is pregnant, the grandparents, should I say, take the child and completely take care of the child, and the teenage mom lives her best life. No, when you've fallen pregnant, go to school, but when you come back, take care of your child. Miss out on the weekend parties, miss out on the clubbing, but take care of your child. And I think that in itself is a consequence.
Does ignorance justify an action? She says, I don't know, it just happened once, the next thing, so you can't hold me responsible because I didn't know, or my knowledge around the area was limited. Does that speak to the level of sex education in schools, or that young teenagers receive? Because maybe, truth be told, social media, you see this, you want to do it, next thing, I didn't know this was the consequence. What do you have to say?
From my knowledge, I believe sex education starts from grade 6.
Yeah.
And in grade 6, you're taught on the whole female genitalia, the male genitalia, everything, and the consequences. It starts there from grade 6. So all the way to...
Do you remember it from grade 6?
No, I don't even remember. And I don't even remember anyone telling me that there is a morning after pill. The only thing that I knew was a condom, but I didn't even know how you can insert one as a female.
But you knew that if you indulged in sex, you'd get pregnant.
Not all the time. Others were doing it and they were not getting pregnant. Come on.
I think maybe it's not necessarily sex education that was taught in grade 6, but science, biology. When I think of sex education, I think of basically the talk.
Yes.
Like for me, my mom would sit me down and then we literally talk about it, and it's the most cringeworthy conversation ever. That is what I believe sex education is, and that's what I think is the main thing that we need in the society. We need our parents and our teachers to be able to sit down with the teenagers and say, you know what, you might indulge in sex, you might not, these are the consequences. You talk as people, not as teacher and student, but as parent and child. Like for me, my mom and I have these talks literally all the time. And so while we have these talks, I'm not going to go out there and be like, because we've had these talks, I'm going to go and have sex with everyone. But I understand the consequences, and I understand how I can protect myself in such a situation. So I think that's the sex education that we need, not necessarily biology, because when you learn about that, you're sort of disconnected. You're sort of looking at the textbook image, but the true consequences don't really resonate with you.
So it's not enough to say books before boys, because boys pay parents. Because I think that's what a lot of us were brought up with law. Look at a boy, you get pregnant, and that's it. But they never get into the reality of what happens. So you're out here wondering, and maybe the consequence is abstract. Like, you know you're going to get pregnant, but it's so abstract, you never think it's going to happen to you. So she says, parents, teachers maybe even need to sit down with young girls and tell them what's up.
I believe it's there, but most probably not to the greatest extent that we'd expect it to be.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, that sex education starts from grade 6. That's the textbook form, right? Then it also comes to the issue where the government also introduced guidance and counseling as a compulsory subject. That's where we find such topics where the teacher comes down to the level of the learners and they talk about all of these things. It's in a scenario where I was telling you that the learners or the girls that I was talking to actually made it clear to me that I'm from a different generation. I don't understand that it really doesn't matter having sex. That's the generation that we have now. And the parents now are leaving too much of the burden on the teacher to do the teaching. Like I said in the beginning, that the parents have loosened the leash, and most parents don't have the talk with their children. You only get shocked when you find out that your daughter is pregnant, and you're wondering, she has sex at the moment, yet she's been having sex for years, because you've never had the talk with your particular child. Our African culture takes us back to the issue that we need to have, or auntie. It was the duty of the aunt to come and talk to you about the whole sex talk, the whole sex education. But these days, labo anti be WhatsApp, you Google everything just comes out. So at the end of the day, the information we are getting is information we want to get, not information we have to have. So it's important that parents have to have the talk. Or auntie, these days are no longer available. So we need to come down to the level of the learner and find out what is their everyday experience. What are you going through? With the whole issue of vuzu parties, with the whole issue of the experiences that they're having in the classroom. What are you talking about with your other classmates? Then you can get to tap into the attitude your daughter is taking from the classmates.
Okay. Let's introduce another dimension to this conversation. The boys and the men responsible for this. Where do they come in? How do we make them responsible for what is going on? How come they don't get the stigma attached to teenage pregnancies? And maybe what needs to happen so that if they stop what they're doing, all this pregnancy issues will disappear. What do you have to say about the main aspect?
Yeah, I believe there should be some bill or something since yes, because these guys are the ones getting us pregnant, isn't? But they don't have to suffer any of the consequences. Their life just goes on. If they have to go to school, they continue with their education. There has to be a bill. If the bill says teenage pregnant girls should not go to school, then which means the guy who impregnated you should stay at home too and take care of the child with you. I mean, so that it can be fair, because it's not fair on the girls saying deal with the consequences. What happens to the guys? There should be a bill or something that deals with them, I believe, honestly.
Who's getting young girls pregnant? Is it the boys in class? Is it older guys? What is going on? Who are you guys hanging out with?
I think it's from the guys our age to the older guys as well. Yeah, so it's not necessarily a specific age group. It's throughout. So yeah, and as for the bill, I think the reason why it's mostly the girl who faces stigma and even the bill applies to girls only is because with a guy, there's nothing to show that you've impregnated a girl. Life goes on, you keep your body like that, there's nothing that changes at all. So even if we were to pass a bill to say, if you've impregnated a girl, you can't go back to school, what guy is going to come and say, okay, I've impregnated this girl, so I'm going to get expelled and actually face the consequences? He'll obviously keep quiet. So I think the reason why we're focusing so much on the girl child is because it's unfair, but then the consequences fall on her. So she's the one who gets the baby. She's the one who is going to show that she fell pregnant, she had unprotected sex or protected sex and was unlucky. She's the one who's actually going to show for it. And also pair that with the fact that our society in general is a patriarchal one. It just makes it even worse for the girl child. So while we should definitely educate the boys and we should tell them that, you have to be careful, don't get someone's child pregnant, you should also put more attention on the girl child, because at the end of the day, she's the one whose body is stuck with the child. So she has to be responsible. She has to know that if I have sex with this guy, he might run away and he might just go like, that's not my child, and there's no way to prove it unless you're going to do a DNA test, which is another story. And so you have to be responsible as a girl child, which is where the sex talks and the guidance counseling comes in. And that's why it has to be more intense on the girl child.
What really needs to be the emphasis? Ensuring that young girls don't get pregnant, or putting in place mechanisms to help them once they're pregnant, because they're going to get pregnant anyway?
I think what really needs to stick into our heads is that teenagers are having sex. That's the first thing that we really need to realize, that teenagers are having sex. So at the end of the day, it is our mandate as adults or the older people to preach abstinence, but we are preaching abstinence to an already sexually active individual. So at the end of the day, abstinence is no longer working. So we need to preach other forms of preventing pregnancy. And we should not only speak of pregnancy only, but other issues related with being in a sexual relationship. So there's need for lots of talk on pregnancy, sex education, the diseases associated with the sexual intercourse. That's very important. Then also we need to teach teenagers what to expect when you are pregnant. So that that person knows that even before I'm pregnant, I should expect to experience 1, 2, 3, 4. Mm-hmm. And they need to have this, forewarned is forearmed. They need to have this knowledge prior. Currently in government, I can say, no one is allowed to teach anything else but abstinence. So I think that's where we are missing it, that we've been teaching abstinence to people that are already sexually active. So there is need to talk about the experience of being pregnant, what happens afterwards, what are you going to experience. And in most cases, teenage pregnancies are unplanned. Most likely the guy is likely to deny, or the guy is likely to, disappear. So at the end of the day, it's up to the teachers and the parents to tell the girls that if you do fall pregnant, you're likely to raise that child on your own. Focus on the consequences that come after being pregnant.
What needs to happen to ensure that this education amendment bill brings lasting and sustainable solutions to the issues surrounding the pregnancy of young girls?
Okay, awareness first and foremost is a very big deal. People need to be made aware of the bill in itself. What does it entail? And let's also focus on the parents as well. I believe if our parents can also be made aware, they can be given that education, it makes it easy for them to talk to their kids at home, you understand? Because at times, maybe it's because of, in our African society, at times when your parents are talking to you about sex and stuff, at times they feel like maybe it was a delela or something like that. After that, you take advantage of that. They're having the sexual talk with you, but it's not always about that. At times when your parent opens up to you, you also get that space to air your views to her. Tell your parents how you feel about certain things, and it makes it easy for that parent and child communication to be available. So when it comes to making this bill known or be made aware to everyone, let's also educate the parents. Let's also educate the community. Let's not only focus on the teenagers or the female teenagers. Let's also focus on the parents so that it makes it easier for them to educate their children at home.
Any last words for young girls that are watching this show right now?
My last words would be, you have to realize that as a young girl, the way our society is built, unfortunately, things are really against us in most instances. We bear the brunt of the pain in most cases, and it's just because everything is so patriarchal and we haven't yet really caught up. So as a young girl, especially if you're ambitious and you want to be successful, you have to have your priorities straight. You have to know what you want. I mean, don't get charmed by a boy for like 1 second and think this is it. Just be aware of what you want at the end of the day. Even if you're having sex or if you're not having sex, always have your priorities in order. Always have the end dream in your eyes, in your vision.
All right, there you have it, and that is it for our discussion about the education amendment bill, which is just but a tip of the iceberg of the conversations that need to happen relating to the pregnancy of young girls. So hopefully this will help you to start having the conversations that need to happen to deal with teenage pregnancies. That is it for this week's episode of The Girls Table. See you next time.